Hi, back in session with Professor P. I hope you guys are staying safe and healthy. We're going to start with Chapter 8 in Archaeology. This is sort of what we do when we're back from the field. We already went. We already did the excavation. We did a lot of stuff. Now, what do we do with the artifacts, the fossils, the ecofacts? There's going to be lots of stuff. What do we do with all this material and this information? This is what we talk about when we talk about classification. Classification, really we're talking about now, how do we sort and classify the data? Classification is really dividing the artifacts into types, dividing the data into types, getting some type of order with classification. We do taxonomy as well. Taxonomy is really dividing them into an ordered classification, right? So classifying them in terms of materials or objects. Let me give you some examples, and I put this also in your module, sort of this taxonomy of humans or chimpanzees. You can't really see it clear, but I put it in your module in your course. It says animal classification by invertebrates, vertebrates, right? That's a way to really do it using different kinds of charts. Here's one I also put in there where somebody ordered plants and put plants that don't make seeds, plants that make seeds, right? And then they ordered it. Taxonomy is really putting them into some type of ordered classification, right? If you go look at your module, you'll see some of the examples that I put in for you guys to sort of understand what we're talking about when we're talking about taxonomy. There's 3 goals of taxonomy. Organizing the data into manageable units. How can I make this manageable for myself? 2 is describing the types. 3 is identifying the relationship between the types. Okay, stick with me on this. Now, when we look at this, we look at typology. That's the classification based on types. When we could do that, then we could do comparative analysis. Okay, archaeological types could be something like maybe the shape. That's how you want to do it. Maybe the size. Maybe how it's decorated, right? Whatever you're going to do, okay? Let's look at different kinds of types, okay? Attribute, right? When we look at attributes, we're really looking at the physical characteristic of an artifact. We could do it by the attribute. A descriptive type is a type based on the form of it, right? The physical property of it. Chronological types are time markers, right? When we talk about chronology, we talked about this in the beginning of the semester, right? Looking at Clovis point, right? Gives you a specific time, right? Looking at projectile points, looking at things that are really going to be time markers, right? That becomes important. Functional types are based on the cultural usage of the artifact, whether it's a weapon, whether it's clothes, whether it's sort of food. It really can be reflective of the role of the artifact within the culture, right? How did the culture really use this? How was it functional to them, right? That becomes important. There's also stylistic types, things like dress. When I did field work in Guatemala, you could look at something like a huipil. And in Guatemala, these were different kinds of textiles, right? With vivid colors and shapes. Give me a minute, because I think I have one here. Yeah, I actually thought I had one in the house. I must have put it somewhere else. And it was a huipil, and you could wear it like as a scarf, as as something to keep you warm, and it had very vivid like colors, and it was very, when you see one of those, you really would relate it with Guatemalan sort of population. It's sort of like looking at Native American, garb. Sometimes you'll know this is just a Native American garb. Stylistic types really can be reflective of dress. Like certain cultures wear a burqa, prada. They want a shroud. These are stylistic kinds of types. So that becomes important to understand. All right, let's move on. Let's move on to units of ordering, the archaeological unit. An archaeological unit is really separating things in times and space to grouping of the artifacts with one another. So we're now grouping them according to one another. We're using an archaeological unit. It's a way of sort of classifying sort of archaeological data into that time and space, okay, just so you guys understand that. We also talk about components. Those are distinctive assemblages, right, which really serve to distinguish the culture of the inhabitants, right? So, like I said, like a Mayan population, right? It's really a physical sort of bounded portion of a site that really can contain distinct assemblages of that culture. So that becomes important. A phase, it's interesting because I can tell you the definition, but remember like the Acheulean tool, like the hand axe, that's part of a phase, sort of looking at, a cultural trait that can be identified with a certain group in time and space, and it's a cultural trait. It's a distinguishing phase of a time, the Acheulean tool, right? Associated with Homo erectus 1.8 million years ago, right? It's associated with things like that. Fire, right? It was associated with Homo erectus 1.8 million years ago, right? A phase, right? Those kinds of artifacts, like an Acheulean tool can be associated with that. All right, let's get to the next one, which is a tradition. A tradition is really, we talk about it also in cultural anthropology, right? Certain behaviors, certain things that you use. In archaeology, a tradition really describes the lasting artifact type, a single tradition associated with a particular culture, maybe a single tool making tradition, the bow and arrow, right? Things like that. So that becomes important. Looking at stone tools, axes, knives, cleavers, spear points, all of those kinds of things can be part of a tradition of a culture. So that becomes important. All right. The last one, petrological analysis, really is just that. It's a study of rocks, looking at, different kinds of stones, can, trace to characteristics of rocks. It can give us an idea of the kinds of tool-making traditions that could have been used, like stone tooling and things like that, clay. All that stuff gets back to sort of the idea of analysis of rocks related to different kinds of like stone tool and traditions. I hope that was clear. These are all concepts that are they're in your book. And I still miss you guys. Hope to see you soon. I hope you sort of understand Chapter 8, what we do when we come back to the field, going into the lab. And remember, some of these different kinds of examples of taxonomy and classification, it can make it easier for you guys to understand. That's up in your module. Okay? Have a great day.